détente with Russia came along, the corporatocracy had set in a big way. And what we're seeing today, I think, is something very similar to feudal Europe, where you've got these very few people, the 1%, living in the castle, and telling the rest of us, hey, you don't own the land. You don't own the land. You can use it, but you owe us. Debt, debt, debt. And our whole Federal Reserve System is built on debt. But now we've got these movements around the world that are equivalent to the old Robin Hood movement. The merry men and women are coming together, and they're dancing in the streets, and they're also protesting pretty loudly. What we need today is a new Magna Carta. We need a new agreement that says that the big corporations that are calling the shots, controlling the world, need to be there to serve the public interest. Serve a public interest. Corporations, we must tell them, you're not there just to maximize profits. You're there to create a better world, a sustainable world, a just world, a world where everyone can thrive and no one has to become a millionaire or a billionaire.
It's interesting that you mentioned the Magna Carta, John. I think that's really relevant in what's happening today. You know, the early Constitution of the state of Virginia was based in part on it, and then our Bill of Rights and Constitution was based on that document. And then now we see the executive branch of government really working diligently to nullify the Bill of Rights and nullify the Constitution. And yet it seems like with every stroke, they are creating more backlash in people who are saying, wait a minute, that these freedoms have a sacred basis from God or nature or the divine creator, whatever their belief system is. It seems like the harder, it's like a line from Star Wars, right? The tighter your grip, Lord Vader, the more we rebels slip through your fingers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You know, I think that's exactly what's happening. That people are waking up. Consciousness is on the rise, and there's a backlash against that because those in control, the status quo, do not want to release and relinquish their power. And as this backlash happens, we get stronger and dig in. And this is historical. You can look throughout history and see how these sorts of things happen.
John, going back to what I wanted to get you to comment on, whether you're for Ron Paul or not, it seems like his message is aligned with what you talk about as far as solutions in terms of the consciousness that we should all be sharing in one way or another. And that is basically that government's role should be to preserve individual liberties and to get out of the face, if you will, of other people trying to control their lives and try to control the direction in which countries should go. And, I mean, all of these messages seem to be very clear from Ron Paul. What's your take on all this?
Well, I agree as far as, we need to stay out of other people's business to a very large degree. I do think we need more regulations on big business because
I agree.
We've seen that business, CEOs of big companies are just like any other human beings. They need to be held in check to some point. There are rapists out there running big corporations. There are pickpockets. And we have to have rules and regulations that people are not allowed to pickpockets. They're not allowed to break through my window and enter my house if I don't want them in my house. There are certain laws that we need to have, and those laws have broken down as it comes to heads of corporations, Glass-Steagall, and so many of the other laws that were put into place after the Depression. When I went to business school in the 60s, I was told there could never be another recession like the one we're going through today because there were rules that were preventing that, and it was true. But those rules then were brought down, some of them under Clinton. And we do need to have rules to govern bad behavior and to recognize that people who run corporations have shown us very, very bad behavior in the last years.
Let me get your response on this, though, because it's interesting that you're saying that. You actually caught me a little by surprise. Do you feel that it's a product of us or a problem that we don't have enough laws passed already and we don't have enough regulation? Or is it a matter of the honest truth is it's all there, the laws are there, but they're not being enforced, and that we need to raise their consciousness up, make people aware of the fact that, you know what, the reality is you can't dump toxins into the water, yet corporations may or may not be doing that. All the laws are there, no, John? Or do we really need to
Glass-Steagall is not there. A lot of laws have been taken away that would have limited the actions of corporations, right?
Well, That's true, like Glass-Steagall, which prevented investment banking houses from joining forces with commercial banks. That was prevented, and that was a very important safeguard. That was dropped, so they all merged. And in fact, we've created new breakdowns in laws by the Supreme Court passing Citizens United, where big corporations can contribute any amount of money they want to political campaigns. That's horrible. That's horrendous, and I'm glad to see that some states and municipalities are fighting that. So I think we have to be careful of how we look at these things, but I don't want to get bogged down in that. I think Ron Paul has an incredibly important message, and I like a lot of it very much. But I also want to say that I think we have to be very careful not to get lulled into the idea that anybody's going to save us. Whether you're in favor of Ron Paul or Sarah Palin or Obama, it doesn't matter. The idea being that it has to come from we the people, because even if Ron Paul should become elected president of the United States, he would still have to cope with a whole Congress and Senate that's totally under the control of the big corporations. He'd still have to deal with 35,000 lobbyists in Washington, D.C. today who are hired by big corporations. We have to recognize that whoever is in power is extremely vulnerable to the big corporations. We also have to recognize that anybody, once he gets in the Oval Office or any position of high power, senator or congressperson, can be taken out very easily by rumor and innuendo. In Jack Kennedy's day, it was well known that he was having affairs with Marilyn Monroe and many other women, and that was okay. They took him out with a bullet. But by the time Clinton came along, you didn't need a bullet. All you needed was a Monica Lewinsky. And we've recently seen the head of the IMF, Strauss-Kahn, he's no hero of mine. I was glad to see him go, and I don't like the IMF. But the fact of the matter is this man was taken down by an accusation from a chambermaid in a hotel. That's a pretty dangerous situation, and that sends a very strong message to Obama or Ron Paul or anyone else that happens to get into the White House, that by God, if you don't mind your P's and Q's, if you don't do what we expect you to do, we can take you down. We don't need a bullet anymore. And I think we all need to be very cognizant of that and recognize that the change has to come from us, we the people. We have to do it. We can't look to any particular individual as our savior. It's got to be us.
I agree, John. I think that's a really crucial point, a very sane point. And I think this gets to the consciousness topic that's resonated throughout this talk. I want to ask you a question on that in particular, John. When it comes to conscious awakening and conscious connection, it's really about knowing yourself. It's about having that connection with other living systems. Consciousness is that thread of awareness and that is woven throughout the fabric of all reality, all living systems. And yet, in society today, we see so much effort spent by advertisers and government to try to dissociate us from who we really are, and to dissociate us from our food, for example. You don't know where it comes from. It comes from a factory, or it's genetically modified. To dissociate from us from real money. It's, gold and silver is not passed around like coins, it's paper. To dissociate us from real information. The news is fabricated instead of being based in reality, and so on. Do you also see this as one of the weapons of disinformation out there to try to prevent consciousness, or do you think that that's all going to change soon anyway, and we're going to overcome that?
Well, it is a weapon, and we are overcoming it. This program right now, we're overcoming it as we're speaking. The books I write overcome it. So many books, so many documentaries, so many programs that are out there. Not the mainstream media. The mainstream media is part of it as that system, that part of that weapon that tries to beat the rest of us down. But the message is getting out there loud and clear. People are getting it around the globe, and it's remarkable. It's wonderful the way this is happening. The internet, streaming, cell phones, and texting, and there's so much going on. It's just phenomenal. And again, if we go back historically, we look at how the Catholic Church controlled everything, all the information that went out, because the only people who copied books were Catholic monks and priests and people who worked for the Catholic Church. So they controlled all the material until the Gutenberg press was invented, and then suddenly everything was freed up. and there was true freedom of expression through an amazing press. We're experiencing a time like that now, where the corporatocracy learned to take over that old press. You know, back in 1980, I lamented the fact that the mainstream media in the United States was owned by 50 corporations. Today, it's 5. And they also control all the big publishing houses, all the book publishing houses. So we kind of went back to that time like when the church controlled all the written material. But now we've got a new Gutenberg press, and that's you guys. That's streaming, that's cell phones, that's text, that's blogging, that's, you know, all of what's going on today, and the word is getting out there big time. So I'm grateful for that, and I think this is the most incredibly exciting time to be alive and to be participating in this. And I just want to quickly add one thing. I grew up in New Hampshire. I come from over 300 years of New England Yankees. My ancestors fought in the American Revolution. I used to wish I was born in the 1700s so I could be part of the American Revolution. Now I know that I'm grateful I'm here now because this is a bigger revolution. This is global, and it's an amazing revolution of consciousness. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, no, John, I'd like you to talk to this, you know, because a lot of times when I speak to people, I'm sure you're amazed as well. When people tune into conventional news outlets, whether it's television or the newspapers or radio, God forbid they're actually out there spending money on weekly subscriptions and getting this news brought to their homes, right to their doorsteps and being brought into their homes. It seems so clear once you just get awoken, just a little bit, you become awake. You notice that the message, no matter what the channel is, and I'd like you to speak to this, and then we'll get into your most recent book, Hoodwinked, and some more of the solutions for the remainder of the show. But the message is just fear-based. You know, you've talked about love and compassion at the at the beginning of the program, but it just seems like to keep everybody down, locked in, and against each other, divided so that these small groups of companies can conquer or put their will on everybody else. It seems that the only way they can do that is to put pervasively out there for everyone to read and to hear messages of fear. People are no good. You know, there's bad people out there that shoot and kill and stab people.
Terrorists hiding in your underwear.
There's terrorists hiding, and watch out at the major department stores. We don't even have to name them by names. At the airports, everywhere. There's so much that technically, quote unquote, there is to be afraid of, that none of this other stuff gets out in the conventional media. I'd like you to talk a little bit about how you feel that might be trying to contain or control consciousness only in a certain direction.
Well, certainly, it's very, very prevalent. You know, I mean, I fly a lot, and every time I go through the TSA security people at the airport, it just really ticks me off. You know, it's like, first of all, it's very ineffective. I know people who you know work for. In sort of, you know, I've known people who were former jackals and some that still are, and they tell me you could get an AK-47 through those machines. If it's made out of plastic, those machines can't detect it. So they're not stopping anybody who really seriously want to take over an airplane.